my privilege to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. Most of you are familiar with him. For the past 9 months, he's been your sheriff in Spartanburg County. So Bill Rhyne is a native of Spartanburg County. Grew up here, went to Chapman High School, went to the Marines for a little bit. So he served our country, served here well, and now he serves the people of Spartanburg County. He was highway patrolman for what, 25 years, Bill? So please make welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Bill Rhyne.
Nobody saw that. That is, that's the second time I've fallen tonight. I promise I'm not drinking. You know, I quit drinking when I was in the Marine Corps back in 1993 because I realized I was developing a problem then. But anyway, that was really a good way to start this. Was it? You know what? Let me do this, Bobby. You mind? I'm gonna get this off. It's gotten a little bit warm. You know, I'm really excited to be here tonight. I had not even taken office good. I wasn't even in office, to be quite honest with you. I had just gotten elected. The county asked me to go ahead and start early, so I started on September the 29th. And I believe it was on September the 30th, Bob, when you called me and started talking to me about Hunters for the Hungry. I was somewhat familiar, but did not know a lot about it. And let me tell you about this man. This is how you get something from your sheriff. You take them to lunch and feed them for free. We went to Manny's and we sat down up in Bowling Springs, and he started talking to me about Hunters for the Hungry and what they were all about. And he gave me a couple of t-shirts, and he gave me a hat that said Hunters for the Hungry, and he gave me this really nice cooking apron. And then he said, "We'd like you to be our keynote speaker at this year's Hunters for the Hungry." And I said, "So you're telling me that you're giving me all this stuff for free? You're taking me to lunch, and then you're going to feed me that night to get to talk about hunting with a bunch of people?" I said, "I'll be there. You don't have to worry about that." So I thought that was a long way away, but here we are today. I'm still trying to catch my breath and busting my tail just now when I was coming up the stage. You know, it's really special because this that time of year, I know everybody's starting to think about it. Show of hands, how many of you already been in the woods getting ready? A handful of you have been in the woods. And, you know, tonight, the nice thing for me is I'm with my people. I have an opportunity to be with folks that share the same passion that I share, because I live down here in Pauline now. My house is 1.5 miles that way. My hunting land is 1.5 miles this way. And I'm already counting the days. Next weekend is going to be the first weekend I'm going to have time to actually get in the woods to start preparing. But you're already thinking about what the season is going to be like. And, you know, for me personally, I don't know if y'all's been the same way, but the last 2 years, I think I jinxed myself, because 3 years ago, when the season started, every single solitary time I stepped in the woods, I could have killed a deer. And I remember talking about it, that I felt bad because it was so easy. Well, then Helene hit, and I barely killed anything that year. If it hadn't been for my boys hunting also, we would not have filled our freezers. And last year was kind of the same way, and hopefully this year is going to be a little bit better. I'm hoping it's going to, but I heard a lot of people talking about what they were dealing with. But you know, hunting's just something special. A lot of people who are not hunters, they look at us and they think we're crazy when we talk about that hunting is a spiritual thing. And for me, it really and truly is. And you know, this time of year, I know everybody's getting ready, but especially as we start moving into October. You know how it is. We get those first freezes, and you can't wait to get in the woods. And I'm an early morning hunter. I love to get in the woods early in the morning. That's when I've had some of my greatest successes, when they're moving. And you all know what it's like when you start walking into the woods early, and it's pitch black, it's cold. Those first cold mornings, you can't get warm for anything. As you're walking in, you're hearing the morning start to kind of come alive. Some of those mornings it's so dark you can't even see your hand in front of your face, but you're sitting there walking in the woods, and as you're going in the woods, you're not wanting to even think about turning that flashlight on, because you don't want to take any chances of scaring any deer that you might have an opportunity to hunt. And you know, in October we're celebrating Halloween, and I know all you rough and tough men in here especially don't want to admit it, but I'll admit it. You accidentally mess up one night and you watch the movie Halloween. And then you're walking in the woods that morning, and it's nice and quiet and it's black, and you start thinking about Michael Myers. And you start thinking if anything moves, you're going to shoot it. And you don't know what it is, but once you finally get to your stand, you relax because you're in your stand and you're able to enjoy it. And you know, there's those days that you start climbing that stand. I can tell you, I've hunted my land so much. From the time I get out of my truck, if I go to my farthest stand, it takes me 15 minutes to walk to my stand. And I legitimately have the foot count down so well, I can keep my eyes closed and walk all the way there and never turn on the light. I know some of you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. And it takes me about 15 minutes to get there. And there's mornings that you get there and it's so dark you cannot even see your hand as you're going up that ladder, climbing up into that stand. But then you get in that stand and that peace starts to settle. That's where that just absolutely spiritual part starts. I can distinctly remember mornings where I look up, and as I look up, you can see all the stars because we're far enough away from Spartanburg and you're deep enough in the woods, you can see the stars. And as the morning starts coming alive, you start seeing those stars disappear. You start hearing the woods come alive. You start to hear something moving in the leaves, and your heartbeat starts picking up. Not quite daylight enough to make that shot yet, but your heart rate starts getting harder and harder and harder. And then your mouth starts getting dry, kind of that cotton feel. Everybody knows what I'm talking about because you're like, man, this is going to be a good morning. I'm going to get it right off the rip. And you're kind of looking around, waiting to get that shot, and then it keeps getting louder and keeps getting louder and keeps getting louder. And you take whether you're hunting with a bow, you're getting ready, or you're getting your rifle, and you're getting ready for it, and all of a sudden it's like right there on top of you, and you're trying to turn your head as slow as you can, but you don't want to see it because we all know when we move just a second too quick or second too soon, they scream and they run. But that heart rate's getting higher and higher. You're feeling your fingertips start to sweat just a little bit. And then finally you make a look all the way to the right and you look down and there's a stinking squirrel. How many of y'all been there? I don't know how many monster squirrels that y'all tried to kill in your life, but there's been a bunch in mine. But then there's that morning when everything goes exactly right. That's what happened for me. Did I shut it off? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's going to take a little bit away from it, but hey, I can be loud. I've been loud my whole life. But then you have those mornings, just like what happened to me last year on opening day. I've been very, very blessed as a hunter because over the last 10 years, 9 out of 10 years, I've killed an opening day deer. I'm one of these hunters that I'm so crazy, there's few people that will probably think this, but you go back to 2021, it was early. My wife's sitting here on the front row. I sent her a picture because I'm a bow hunter. I'm out every year on the 15th. I'm out there on opening day ready to hunt. And I took a picture that morning just to send my wife to show her what it looked like. Didn't know until after the fact. I got to looking at that picture and the deer I was fixing to shoot was already coming down the trail and I could see it coming in. Well, she came down. It was a really big doe that day. I shot her. She took off running. It was a hot morning. It was one of those mornings that the mosquitoes were in your ear. It was driving me crazy. And I started searching. And after about an hour and 45 minutes, I had a good blood trail. It disappeared. I could not find the deer. And I was like, what do I do? Well, I've got 2 boys who are avid hunters also. They love to hunt and love to fish. My oldest son is actually at Lander. He's a collegiate angler, fishes in college. But I knew I wasn't going to find this deer. And I picked the phone up and I called the school because I was friends with the principal. I said, hey, it's Bill. He's like, yeah, what's going on? I said, I got a problem. He's like, well, I said, I shot a deer and I can't find it. I said, I need you to send Will and Ethan down here from the school to help me find the deer this morning. So he did. He sent them from school, and it took my boys literally about 20 minutes before they found the deer. And then they didn't want to go back to school, and I had to make them go back to school. They wanted to help me take it to the processor and all, but you know, they helped me out that morning. But it's just such a wonderful thing when you get to do that, especially when you get to experience it with your family. When you have that morning when you harvest that deer, and then you take it, and then you're providing for your family. And it's just something special about that. Let me ask you this. What if you completely, you want to check that for me? What if it was taken away from you? What if you never got to hunt again? Well, that's what happened to me. September of 2019, September the 8th, already getting geared up. I had been getting geared up for deer season. I was down in Florida at a conference. Well, I'm still with the Highway Patrol, and Hurricane Dorian was heading towards us, and we had to leave to head home. I had been in Columbia at State Emergency Operations Center because that's what I ran for the patrol when hurricanes came in town. Luckily, Hurricane Dorian did not hit, but then I had to come on back home, and I got back home actually on September the 7th from being down there at the hurricane. The morning of September the 8th, they had been putting a new roof on my house that week. I got up that morning and my wife said to me, she says, "Do you want to go to church today?" This morning, because she knew I was tired because I'd been down there for a week in preparation with the hurricane.
Yes.
That'll be much better. Thank you so much. So we were preparing, we were down there, as I said, we were prepared because of the hurricane. I'd gotten home, and that morning my wife, when we got up, she said, "Do you want to go to church this morning?" And I said, "I don't know, I'm just really, really tired." And she said, "Well, we have to do discipleship tonight with the kids, and they're going to have a service tonight." And I said, "Well, let's just wait, and we'll go tonight." So I worked around the house all day that day, and then we got to church that night. Many of you here probably know Seth Buckley. And Seth Buckley and I were sitting having a conversation at the church that evening in the hangar after the service was over. And let me take you back just to a little over a week ago. I was sitting in a funeral in Columbia for Senator Graham. And something hit me again that has hit me many times over the last 7 years, and it was simply this: it was, why me? And the reason I say that is, as I was talking to Seth Buckley that night, all of a sudden it felt like somebody punched me in the side of my face. It felt like every single tooth in my mouth abscessed at one time. The pain started running down my throat into my chest. I finished my conversation with Seth, and as I walked out, I walked over to my wife, who was signing our kids up for discipleship. I said, "Babe, something's the matter." I said, "I don't know what's going on." I told her what I was experiencing. She said, "I think you're having a stroke." I said, "No." I said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." She said, "Sit down right there." So I sit down, and she's trying to get our kids together. And I start to black out, and I realize something's bad wrong. And I told my wife, I said, "You've got to get me to the hospital right now." And I was having a conversation with Seth specifically about one of my children, and we were talking about some challenges. You know, it was middle teenage years and the challenges we face. And it really, I'll never forget this moment, because I remember my wife driving us to the hospital. I had all three kids in the car. My wife was driving. I was in extreme pain. My chest was hurting very, very bad. But as we were going down Pine Street, passing where the old Hardys and Long John Silver and all that were, I think it's Garner Road, I remember looking to the right and thinking in my mind, was I ever going to see that again? And in the back of my car, the son that I was talking about with Seth, that we were going to have some conversations about, was steadily praying, "God, please don't take my dad for us tonight." Every time I tell that, I struggle just a little bit. My apologies. So we get to the hospital, and they knew something was bad wrong, but they didn't know exactly what it was. And they took me to a CT, and there came a point that I was in a lot of pain, and I was telling them, "Y'all got to get me out of here. I'm in severe pain." And they said, "Mr. Rhyne, we know exactly what's going on, but you're going to have to give us just a minute. We've got to get one more image." And they were continuing to get that image. And I kept telling them, "You've got to get me out of here." And they started to move me out of the machine, and I felt somebody grab my hand. And as I moved out of the machine, I looked up, and it was Brad Davis. He's one of the emergency room doctors. I knew Brad very well because his son Reese played baseball for me. I was coaching travel ball at that time, and he told me, he said, Bill, you're going to have to be still. We've got to get some more images because we know exactly what's going on. And he told me, he said, if you move, you may die. So obviously I wasn't moving. They finished up all of my CT scans, and when I got into CT, I hopped right off that bed. I laid down on CT. When I came out of CT, there were like 8 of them picking me up, and they were moving me like the most fine piece of china you've ever seen to ensure that I didn't get moved too much. As we moved back they moved me back into my hospital room at that point in the emergency room, and I could see my wife sitting there and Brad was sitting in her face, and I could see the concern in her eyes, but I still didn't exactly know what was going on. And at that moment in time, they told me that I had suffered a complete type A aortic dissection. The exact same thing that just killed Lindsey Graham just a few weeks ago. And as I go back and I say that at the time, why me? But there's a deeper meaning of why me when it comes right down to it. That night, we pretty much knew that I was in a fight for my life at that point in time. We recognized and understood, and my wife understood it better than me, but I had roughly somewhere between a 2 to 5% chance of surviving what I was fixing to have to go through. There comes a time in life that you don't want to face. But I had to tell each one of my children goodbye that night. I had 30 seconds to tell each one of my kids goodbye. And I commonly, when I do my testimony and I'm at churches, I tell people, and I have them close their eyes and I ask them, in the sake of time, I'm not doing that tonight, but I ask them, if you were in that position, what would your words be to your loved ones? What is it that you would be saying to your loved ones at that moment in time? And I have them close their eyes for 30 seconds to just envision it. But when it's over, it's real simple that I tell them this. If you have to say anything other than I love you, then you need to evaluate your relationships with your family right now. You need to evaluate your relationships with your friends right now. You need to evaluate your relationships with those that are closest to you right now. But prior to evaluating that relationship with your family, your friends, or anybody that is close to you, you have to evaluate your relationship with Christ. Because if you do not have a right relationship with Christ, you will never have a right relationship with your family and your friends. It's just very, very simple. So I went into surgery that night, and I will never forget this, and I've never forgotten this. My wife said goodbye to me and gave me a kiss. She works in the medical industry, and she's a radiation therapist, and they let her be back there when they were doing all my surgery prep. They let her go all the way up to the point that they took me into surgery. And when she leaned over and kissed me and said goodbye, the lady that was pushing my bed, standing right here behind me, she goes, no, there's never any goodbyes. It's just see you later. And I've never forgotten that. And it goes back to my message, and I'm not necessarily here to give my testimony, but I think it's important to hear. But it is never goodbye, it's just see you later. As long as we have that relationship that we're supposed to have with God, we know what waits for us on the other side. The interesting thing, I've never been as at peace as I was at that time. My greatest struggle that I faced in that moment in time was the fact that I did not want to leave my family. But I was not afraid of leaving this earth. I was just afraid of leaving my family. My son had already lost his mother, our oldest one. We're a blended family. My oldest one lost his mom when he was 5 years old to breast cancer. Last thing he needed was to be losing his dad when he was 15 years old. I wanted to walk my daughter down the aisle, which I will be doing next year on September 25th, by the way. She's getting married next September 25th. I wanted to see my grandchildren because both of my grandfathers had passed away when I was born. I never got to have a relationship with my grandfathers. And I was like, why is all this being taken away? But I wasn't going to question. After 9.5 hours of surgery, probably 14 hours later, I woke up. My wife was to the right side of me holding my hand. My sister was to the left side of me, and I was in CBRU. It's kind of like, I guess you'd say, ICU for heart patients. They had to replace my aorta. They had to replace my aortic valve. They had to remove both coronary arteries from my heart and rebuild my thoracic arch over my heart. when they did that, they had to invert my bed and put my head in the water to try and pull as much blood in my brain at that time that they could. But they told my wife, he will have a stroke. And we'll just have to make determinations after the fact, if he survives, of what the long-term effects are going to be. After they rebuilt that, they reimplanted both my coronary arteries, and then everything had ruptured from my lower descending aorta all the way to my right femoral artery. And they did some regrafting at the top to try and stabilize that. But I still have actually where it ruptured, there's still damage down through there that they can't get to, but it's stabilized at the top, and they keep a really close check on that to ensure. I was on a breathing machine at the time, and they said that I would be on the breathing machine for probably 40 hours. Within 6 hours from the time I came out of surgery, I came off the breathing machine. I did not have a stroke. And I remember about 2 days after I came out of surgery, I remember my doctor, Stephen Latham, was standing in my bed, and I'll never forget, he had his arms crossed, and he had his right hand on his chin, and he was just shaking his head. And he walked over to me, and he put his hand on my right shoulder, and he looked at me, he said, I don't know what God has planned for your life, but it's something special. He said, because there's no medical explanation on why you're alive. I didn't save your life. I just merely put you back together. God had his hands. God had his hands on you the entire time. I don't know what his plans are for your life, but it's something special. It wasn't too long after that they told me I'm an avid motorcyclist, I'm an avid hunter, and I love my job as a law enforcement officer. It is truly a calling. It's a calling, and if you do not have a servant's heart, you're never going to be effective in this job. That's just the reality. But they told me you'll never work again, you'll never hunt again, you'll never ride a motorcycle again. You just need to be glad that you're alive. Well, in the moment, I accepted that, and I was fine with that because I was alive. All right? But I'm stuck. And as time went on, I remember walking down my driveway talking to my captain, Kelly Hughes, a very dear friend of mine. He's now a major on the highway patrol. And I remember being very upset that I was having to retire because I did not like the thought that my health was going to dictate my future. And I said, this is not acceptable for me. My health is not what's going to dictate what I'm going to do. And I went to him, and I went as far as having conversations with attorneys about how we handle the retirement side of things with Social Security and all that. And I just got mad. I just got mad. And I said, I'm not retiring. And they're like, hey, you really don't have a choice. I said, yes, I do. So over time, I spent roughly about 7 months in rehab. I checked all the boxes, and they finally were like, okay, you can go back to work. So I went back to work. Had to go back slow, only working a couple of days a week, but got back to full strength. Ended up getting promoted to lieutenant. But 1 year, getting back into talking about some hunting, 1 year and a month after my aortic dissection, when they told me that I would never hunt again, my son, my oldest son and I, they didn't want me hunting alone. We went hunting on October the 17th. The day before was boss's day. I hate the word boss. I can't stand anybody to call me their boss. I tell all the officers at the office to call me Bill. My mom and dad gave me a name for a reason. I did not run for sheriff for a title. I didn't run for sheriff for a position. I ran for sheriff for a job, for the love of the county that I love, and I want to see us be able to change this county and change the trajectory of where we're going. I'll talk more about that in just a little while. But I had forgotten to thank my administrative assistant for something she had left in my office. And it had gotten kind of late that morning. It was really cool that morning. And it had gotten kind of late. But this was one of my first times back in the stand. But we had to be in a ground blind because they would not let me climb. And it was about 10:15 in the morning. And I was sending a text message. And I said to Will, I said, you ready to go? I said, it's dead. We might as well get out of here. And he's like, yes, sir. We start getting things together, and then all of a sudden I heard something. And I heard like a grunt. I'm not going to try and make the sound for you. You all know what it sounds like. And I looked at Will. I said, did you hear that? He said, hear what? I said, I just think I heard a grunt. And next thing I know, I hear it again. And Will says, Dad, see if you can do something, make it come back, make it call back at you. Well, I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do that or not. And about that time, 85 yards straight out in front of us, a doe comes out of the thicket. And then all of a sudden, all I saw was antlers. And they come out. And I was like, holy cow. Because it was a cow. Literally, with horns, antlers. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I grabbed the gun and I was trying to get on it, and he was chasing. And that doe took off running, and that deer right behind her. Over this little edge and down a hill. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And Will looked at me and he said, Dad, I think you can get it to come back. I said, what are you going to do? Here, deer. How am I supposed to make it come back? And he's like, well, see if you can rattle him back in. And I thought it was a lost cause. And I picked up my bag and I started rattling him a little bit, and then I'd grunt just a little bit, and I'd wait a second, and I'd rattle a little bit later. About 20 minutes goes by. I said, Will, he ain't coming back. I said, you ready to go? And he's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And I started to get up, and I remember turning and looking out the side window from my ground blind, and that joker was standing 35 yards away. And he was mad because there was another buck in there trying to get his woman. That's just all there was to it. He was stomping his foot. He was shaking his head. He was blowing. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he starts coming across right in front of us. And as he starts coming across, he's coming at about a 35-degree angle, and there's some trees there, and I don't have a shot. And I grabbed it. I was shooting 30-30 at the time because I couldn't take any harder hit than that in my shoulder. And I could not draw a bow back yet. They would not let me draw a bow. Of course, I couldn't make that shot. And as he's coming across, I waited, and I said, as soon as he goes in between those two oak trees, I'm going to grunt at him, and I'm going to smoke him. He's like, okay. So I'm sitting there waiting, and he comes right between those two trees. All y'all know what I'm going through right now. Heart rate's through the roof. I can't hardly swallow. Feels like I got a bunch of cotton in my mouth. My hands are shaking like crazy. And I get the rifle up. I pull the hammer back on the rifle. As soon as he hits those two oaks and he gets in the middle, I went, "Rah!" And he stopped, and I went, click. Gun didn't go off. And I was like, oh crap. And I looked at the gun, and I pulled the trigger back again, pulled the hammer back, and I went, click. And Will's like, did you load the gun? I said, I guess I didn't. You know, it had been a while since I hunted. So like I'm freaking out at this point in time. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I grabbed the weapon and I looked and I checked around and I'm like, what the heck? And this deer's walking. He's on his way out. I mean, he's cruising, and I'm like, I'm going to miss my chance again. So I slammed the thing back in. I pulled the hammer back. He's at this point, he's about 70, 75 yards, and this is one of those newfangled Marlin 30-30s, not one of the old ones with the drilled barrel. This is a rolled barrel, so you know, you get out around 85, 90 yards, you're starting to get into some trouble when it comes to accuracy with that weapon, and I'm getting nervous. I pulled a hammer back, I aim at him again, click. I'm like, what is going on? The gun is broke. And then I was like, oh, I didn't take the safety off. So I get back up, and I literally take the safety off, pull the trigger, go up, and he was like, click, click, boom. And my son says, Dad, did you even freaking aim? And I said, yes, I aimed, and the deer jumped, and we knew I knew, or at least I felt like I hit him, and he took off running, and he ran over a hill, and we couldn't really tell where he went, so we just chilled out for a minute, and we go to looking, we can't find anybody. We can't find anything. And we're walking down through there, and as we're walking down through, we find one teeny tiny drop on a leaf. And when I find that on that leaf, I had no idea, and I told him, I said, let's do this. I said, you go left, I'm going right. And let's come back together and see if we can find anything. So I hooked around the edge and went around the edge, top of that hill. And my son went down to the left. And I'd probably gotten about 30 yards over because you could see pretty good, because that time of the year, everything was kind of dying, leaves were coming down, and I could hear my son off in the distance screaming, Dad, Dad, I got it, I got it. And I went down there, and when I picked that deer up, It was only a 7-point, but it was an old 7-point. He was 204 pounds. And just this rush of emotion came up. Just a different level of appreciation. Because I was hunting again. And I realized something that had been taken from me had been given back. And then the specialness of having my son there with me at that moment that I'd had to tell goodbye to a year before. It was very overwhelming. I got that deer mounted, and I did a little quarter turn on him. And if you go to my office, or go to my house, and you stand in my office, sitting at my desk, that deer's looking right at me. And I did that very specifically, because every time I look at that deer, every time I look at that deer, I always think, doctors can only give you a diagnosis, but God's going to be the ultimate determining factor on what's going to happen in your life. And I was fortunate enough to have that given back to me at that time. You know, one of the things I tell so many people as hunters, you know, we go out as hunters and we harvest wildlife. Conservatives go out there and they protect it. But if we're responsible, we do both. And we do so much to advance the hunting industry and what we get to do every single day. I value every opportunity that I have to go out and get in the woods. It means so much to me. The opportunities to take other people. Just a couple of years ago, I had a young man brought to me. My youngest son was dating a little girl, and this was like one of the greatest things. Men, especially in here, if you get this opportunity, I highly encourage you to be part of this. This is a young man who never shot a weapon in his life. I've been a firearms instructor for many years. I started him at the very bottom and took him all the way up, learning how to shoot with iron sight before I put him on a scope. It got towards the end of deer season. I wasn't the one taking him hunting. Somebody else was. He had never gotten anything, and they called me and they said, hey, he's not killed a deer. You think you can take him? And it was the last day of the season. I said, we'll get them, but we're going to have to work hard because they're under heavy pressure. And the last day of the season, I got to be with that young man when he killed his first deer. Funny story, we went down to Craig Lancaster's that day to take the deer, and the guy that was doing the process had looked at the fella, and he was taking the blood and wiping the blood on his face and all that, and he looked at him and he told him, he said, this your first deer? And he's like, yes, sir. He said, well, you just keep on hunting with your grandpa. He's going to teach you a lot. And I'm just barely old enough to be the kid's daddy, much less be his grandpa. But it's special, special, special times when we get to do that. But this is where I want to tie things back into what Hunters for the Hungry does. Let me say one other thing first. I make you this promise. I was given a second chance in life, period. I don't have time to talk about my rise to being able to run for sheriff and being successful to run for sheriff. My wife will be the first one to tell you this, and one of my chief deputies, Bobby Welburn, is here with me tonight. I eat, sleep, and breathe my job. Every decision that we make at the sheriff's office is for the betterment of Spartanburg County. God gave me a second chance. And when I sat in Lindsey Graham's funeral and I said, why me? Don't ever think that there's not such as a real thing as survivor's guilt. When you're given that second chance and you're a person of faith, you carry a tremendous amount of responsibility because I've said it once to my wife, I've said it 50 times to my wife. What is it that he wanted from me? Why did he give me another chance? Why did he not give Lindsay another chance? Why did I survive? Why did he not survive? So for me, it has put a tremendous amount of responsibility on my shoulders to represent that opportunity. And as sheriff, one of the things that I promise each and every one, every day, we are trying to figure out ways of being better. We want to be better. We're not going to be right all the time. But I promise you we're going to be well reasoned in every single decision that we make for this county. I'm fortunate enough, Bobby's been in law enforcement for over 45 years, and my entire command staff has been born and raised in this county. And I think there's not, except two, but they raise their children here. I don't think there is a single person here that does not want to have the opportunity to give their children a level of generational wealth. But the reality is most of us are not in a position to give our kids generational wealth. But what we can do at the sheriff's office, with those folks that I have there within my command staff, we all care so deeply about where this county is and where this county goes. Every decision we make is based upon giving this county generational wealth as we continue to grow and what we're pouring into this county every single day. But going back to Hunters for the Hungry, one of the things that I have recognized and one of the things that we have done, we have started a huge nonprofit within our office, and we serve several different areas. But one of the things that we serve is called Serve and Connect. Serve and Connect is focused specifically on dealing with food insecurities across our country. I don't know if you realize this or not, but school started this past week on Thursday, and there are many children that are going to our schools right now in Spartanburg County that they have not had 3 hot meals since they got out of school in May. They're getting at least 2 if they're eating breakfast and lunch when they come to school. But when they get out of school at Christmas, they're going to have, because we have food insecurities right here. I don't care where you go in the United States. You can go to the richest communities. You can go to the poorest communities. You can go to any middle income communities. The reality is this: there are food insecurities across the entire nation. And we, as a society, have a responsibility to help with that. One of the things that I commonly talk about through servant leadership is really simply this. You know, to be an effective law enforcement officer, you have to have a servant's heart. And my goal for you is that servant's heart, as you grow within our agency, is to turn into a servant leader. Servant leadership is clearly defined as just simply clarity balanced with grace and expectations balanced with accountability. And we have had to invert that circle for us to be successful and invert that triangle. And if you look at that triangle, I'm at the very bottom. I'm the most insignificant person at the office. If I look at it any other way, we're not going to be successful. And then as you go up from there, next area is going to be my chiefs, and then my supervisors, and then my road deputies. But the most important part of that triangle is the community. Because we as an agency, we as a community have to work together to be successful. And I tell about my story, and I tell people, if you think about that opportunity being taken away from me in my mind, and you start thinking about the folks that are fighting for those insecurities, those food insecurities, they've gone through the same thing for some reason or another. There's not a person out there who struggles to put food on their tables, who don't want to put food on their tables for their families. But we have to come together to support them. And that's where Hunters from the Hungry plays such a crucial role. You know, I looked up a couple things, and I really got locked in on Matthew 25, verse 35, and Matthew 25, verse 40. And it says, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in." That's Matthew 25, 35. But we'll jump all the way to 40. Because 25, verses 35 through 45, really and truly emphasizes the importance for us to show compassion to others who are in need. But Jesus wraps it up in 40 when he says, "The king replied, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you have now done for me.'" That's what has to drive us out here. Everybody in here has probably got their deer tags already. Everybody in here got an additional doe tag this year. What a great thing it is. What a great opportunity it is for you to take something that you love, something that you treasure, because I know everybody in here loves hunting just as much as I do. And to have that opportunity to take that extra doe tag or those extra 2 doe tags, whatever it is, and to be able to take that and to provide something to other people who have less, who are in need, is truly a blessing for you when you leave this earth. You are being blessed for doing something for less, for those that are less fortunate. So as you go into your season this year, I wish you the greatest of luck. I hope you kill the biggest deer that you've ever killed in your life. I just pray that I see some more deer this year after the last couple seasons. But I appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to come out here just to share a little bit of my story. There's a lot more to my story than what I've had an opportunity to talk to you about tonight. But just remember this: every time you walk in the woods, it's a blessing. Take that blessing and bless somebody else. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful hunting season.
All right, I want to say thanks again to Sheriff Rhyne for coming tonight with Hunters for the Hungry. Great testimonial here, and we just have a little small token of appreciation that we'll give him here in just a second.
Thank you very much.
I got one more thing I want to say, because my wife can't kill me in front of all of y'all. So I've got a lot of witnesses. But whoever wins that 28 gauge over and under over there, if I don't win it, see me at the back door before y'all leave. You might get out of jail free card.
It might have been involved in the crime, you know?
All right, well, just to check, where's Kelly? She's in the back. Kelly, she's still back there. Do we have any tickets left on the 3-gun? 6? Okay.